This mechanism is absolutely genius. It's an example of an automatic siphon. And you might know this, but I'm already a huge fan of automatic siphons. The siphon is embedded in the container. So when the water level rises above the top of the siphon automatically primes and the container empties itself. You can even use automatic siphons to add binary numbers together, for example. Link to that video in the card and the description. But it pains me to admit that automatic siphons have a huge flaw. Look what happens when I fill this container really slowly. Instead of the siphon priming, the water just dribbles over the edge. No seal is created, and so the siphon never starts. You could just make the siphon channel narrower so that even if you're filling the container very slowly, the surface tension of water will ensure that there is a seal and the siphon will begin. The downside of that is the water flows out of the container very slowly. What if you wanted to have a container that you fill very slowly, but that empties very quickly? You might think that's a very niche requirement, but the problem has actually already been solved. Look, I'm very slowly filling this container, and then at some point, suddenly, the whole thing starts to empty very quickly. And what you're looking at here is a urinal siphon. If you've spent long enough standing at a public urinal, you'll be familiar with that moment where all the urinals around you suddenly start flushing at the same time. You might be wondering why I chose such a poorly maintained amenity for this shot. To be honest, I just didn't want anyone walking in whilst I was filming a urinal until it did the flush thing, so I chose the worst toilet in Beckenham. This simultaneous flushing thing might be uniquely British, I'm not sure, but the idea is instead of each urinal having its own manual flush mechanism, they're all connected to the same cistern, and the cistern empties periodically. And if you want a container to empty periodically, well, an automatic siphon seems like the perfect mechanism to use. But we don't want these urinals to be flushing too frequently, so we turn down the flow of water into the container. But now we have that dribbling problem. And we can't just make the siphon channel narrower because then the flush wouldn't be strong enough. So we need some way of getting a good seal around a wide siphon, even when the container is being filled slowly. And that's exactly what this mechanism achieves. And this is my 2D version of that. Just a quick note on the 2D-ness of this. I've mentioned in the past that when you create 2D versions of things, you can end up creating additional chambers. Like typically an automatic siphon would sit in the middle of the container. But when you flatten that, you end up splitting the container into two regions that aren't connected. So when you drop down to 2D, it makes sense to put the siphon mechanism to one side of the container instead of in the middle. The issue with this mechanism is that we have about 3 different siphons all working together, and you can't push them all to one side because they'll block each other. So there's actually an additional layer here. You can see that around the back. So you've got the main chamber of the siphon, and then this kind of thinner inner chamber at the front here with a white background. So strictly speaking, this isn't 2D. I mean, strictly speaking, none of the mechanisms I've ever built are 2D because of the universe we live in, but you know what I mean. Just to say, by the way, this video would have been much harder to make if it wasn't for this video by Mr. Matt and Mr. Chow. My design is based heavily on their animation. Link in the card and the description to that video with their excellent analysis. To explain how it works, I've got this slow motion footage, but I am going to speed it up and slow it down and pause it in different places to match the explanation that I'm giving. But I'll show it all the way through at normal speed and at 1/3 speed at the end. So here's how it works. As the container fills up, so does the siphon chamber. That's because air is able to escape from the siphon chamber through various routes, but ultimately via this hole here. When the water level reaches the bottom of that inner chamber, it's able to enter through this small hole here, so the water level rises through there as well. And just to be clear, the reason you're seeing water here is because it's part of the main siphon chamber, and you can see that by looking around the back. When the water level reaches the bottom of this channel, nothing really changes. The water continues to rise as before, but look what happens when the water level reaches the bottom of this channel. Now the level of water in the main siphon chamber stops rising. That's because all exit routes are now blocked for the air inside the main siphon chamber, so no more water can get in. But this surface and this surface are open to the atmosphere, so we should expect them to match the level of the water in the main container. At this point, it becomes clear why there's a U-bend down here. If there wasn't a plug of water here, the air in the main siphon chamber would always be able to escape. And in fact, you can see the level of water here slowly going down. And that's happening in such a way that the difference in height between here and here matches the difference in height between here and here, which is what we would expect because the pressure difference between the inside of the siphon chamber and the outside atmospheric pressure should be the same in both positions. In Mr. Matt and Mr. Che's animation, there isn't a substantial U-bend in this position, and the water level doesn't change during the course of the animation. I figured out that that wasn't right after some initial test runs. You just need to make sure that this length is longer than this length. Otherwise, you'd get air bubbling through and you'd end up back where you started with water trickling over the inlet. Another mistake I made actually was having the height of this and the height of this too close together. That's because I assumed once the water reaches this point, the height inside the main part of the siphon chamber stops going up completely. But actually, because the water level is going down here, that allows for a slight water level rise here. So in this failed version, as soon as the water starts tipping over the edge, you reach a kind of equilibrium where the water coming in matches the water going out and nothing's ever going to happen. But anyway, the really clever part is just coming up. As the water in this channel reaches the top, a siphon is initiated. And because this channel is so narrow, the siphon initiates even at this really slow rate of water coming into the cistern, which is the whole point. This hole is small enough that water can't get back in quickly enough to replace the water that's being siphoned out, and so the level of the water in this inner chamber goes down. And because the water level has gone down, it's no longer blocking this channel, and the air that was trapped inside the siphon chamber now has an escape route, like this. And crucially, by this point, the level of water in the main container is all the way up here. All that additional pressure pushing down means that the level of water in the siphon chamber is going to rise incredibly quickly now that the air has a way to get out. And crucially, that sudden jump in the water level is enough to create a seal in this tube here. And so the main siphon is initiated. One quick thing to clear up. Look, this was one of my earlier designs. Stupidly, I thought the small inner siphon and air inlet tube could be vented directly to the outside like this. But that just means that the main siphon chamber will always have access to air from the outside world once that smaller inner siphon is activated. And because air can get in, the water level inside drops down very quickly until it's below the level of the siphon and the siphon breaks. Whereas in the working design, those two channels merge with the main siphon here, so that once the main siphon is activated, that route is blocked for the passage of air coming in. In other words, we only want air to be able to get out of the siphon chamber for a brief moment so that water can be pushed up and over the main siphon channel. But once the main siphon has started, we need to stop air from being able to get back in, because that would kill the siphon. And by having the air inlet and priming siphon join the main siphon channel here, we can achieve that. So let's just pair everything up to the real world 3D device. So this is the same as this bit here, right? So this siphon sits inside the cistern, and this would sit inside the cistern. Around the base there's this gap you can see here. That is that gap there that lets the water in. I've loosened it already so we can take it off. And inside, so you've got this kind of box bit here, this open box. That represents this inner cartridge that I've created with the white background here. This is the air inlet. So I hope you can see what's going on there. So look, that's where the air can get in. So that's that entrance there to the air hole. That sits at the bottom in there. And so the air has to come up and over here in the same way that the air has to go up through there and over into there to get out. And then the copper pipe, this one here, that's the primer siphon, that's this one here. You'll notice that the funny box bit has a hole in the bottom there. That's equivalent to the little hole in the bottom of the inner cartridge in my design. And this is the main siphon, so that's the up and over there. This U-bend bit here is inside. Right, here's one I broke earlier. There you go, that's that U-bend bit. And you can see those two holes there. That's the exit for the air tube and the exit for the primer siphon. And just like in ours, they both feed into that final U-bend part there. As promised, here's the whole sequence at normal speed. here's the whole sequence at 1/3 speed. This was a really tricky setup to film, by the way, because I needed light coming from the back, so I'm illuminating the back wall to get light coming through that blue liquid, but I also needed that inner cartridge to look good, and that needs to be lit from the front. So, of course, my camera was set to manual, and I'm playing around with frame rate and aperture and so on. And it got me thinking about the difference between point and shoot photography and DSLR photography, because there are so many things in life that are like that. Like making bread, for example. You could use a bread machine. It's dead easy and you get some bread out at the end, but it has its limitations. You don't have as much control over things. And then there's the slightly more advanced version where you knead by hand and bake in the oven. Another example, and you're not going to believe this because it's just such an unbelievably smooth transition to the sponsor of this video. Another example is razor blades. Look at the blades on a cartridge razor. See how they're flexible? And that's by design, because you're supposed to be able to just drag the razor down your face without worrying about the position of the blades. And as a result, you end up with a smooth shave. But just like the bread machine or the point and click camera, there are trade-offs. In this case, razor burn and ingrown hairs. And just try shaving if you've let your beard grow out a little bit. A cartridge razor just gets clogged up instantly. Before the bread machine, there was the oven. And before the cartridge razor, there was the safety razor, like the Henson AL13. The Henson AL13 is friendly to your skin by default. That's because the firmly held blade extends just 30 microns from the shave plane. And you very quickly learn to achieve a close shave by following the contours of your face. It's interesting, isn't it, that my granddad had that simple skill for his entire adult life, whereas I'm only just learning it since Henson started sponsoring my videos. And it really fits with this buy it for life thing that I've been trying to do recently. You pay a fair price for a precision engineered handle from a company that has also made parts for the ISS and Mars rover, and then that's yours for life. The blades themselves are just pennies after that. If you're interested, go to hensonshaving.com/stevemould and use promo code stevemould at checkout to get 100 free blades with the purchase of your AL13 razor. The link is also in the description, so check out Henson Shaving today. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, don't forget to hit subscribe, and the algorithm thinks you'll enjoy this video next.